Hey book besties, welcome back to my channel. So I have a fun little video today. I am a romantasy reader at heart. That is my genre, and I love a little bit of science fiction thrown into there. That is the genre of books that I gravitate towards. But part of my reading goal this year is to actually move towards genres that maybe I'm not too thrilled about. And one of those genres being historical fiction. Now, I have had so many recommendations for historical fiction. I have, like this stack, a few historical fiction books here. Today's video is going to be historical fiction novels that are on my TBR list. First book on my list is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This book is actually about a girl named Marie, and she lives in Paris with her father, who works at the Museum of Natural History. This book actually takes place during World War II in Paris, as the Nazis are trying to occupy France. So Marie and her father actually go to live with her uncle in Saint Malo, and with them they have this jewel that's very precious that acts as a main point of the story. So while this story is following Marie and her father and her uncle's lives during this time in Nazi occupied France, it's also following a young German orphan named Werner who is obsessed with radios, I believe, and throughout the story their lives kind of intersect in a way. I'm not sure about this book other than that. I'm hoping for a subplot of romance because I do love romance. But the reason I came across this book, which it's also the winner of the Pulitzer Prize, which I think is really cool, is in 2023 Netflix came out with their movie adaptation of this book, and the trailer was so beautifully done, and it also included in the trailer one of my favorite songs, which is Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy, who is a French composer. And when I saw the trailer, I was like, I want to read the book first before I watch this show. So I immediately bought this book off of Amazon, and since then I have not read the book. I know it's absolutely terrible, but I just got back into my reading passion about 5 months ago. So yeah, this is one of the books that's on my TBR list for this year. I'm super excited. I want to read the book first and then I will watch the TV show. I think it's a TV show and not a movie. This will be really fun to read this year. Really hoping for a romance subplot. The next book that is on my TBR list for historical fiction is The Nightingale by Kristin. I got this about a month ago with my best friend in LA, and this is a book that we're supposed to be reading together, but I've been reading through a glass. But it is on my list for this year. I know so many people who have read this, who have bawled their eyes out over it. Most of the gist that I know about this book is it takes place also during World War II between two sisters. I know that it's going to be made into a movie with the Fanning sisters, I believe, but I heard this book is heartbreakingly beautiful. I've seen so many people cry about it. Other than that, that's all I know. I have read about 50 pages into it, and from what I've read, Kristin writes so beautifully. It's like the words are just so clear, they're so concise, it paints a picture in my mind. So this is actually the first Kristin book I will be reading. I hope this one makes me a fan of her, but I will say on reviews that I've seen, barely any bad reviews about this. Like all 5-star, like I'm pretty sure the 5-star reviews of this is like over 70 to 80% on Goodreads, which is like outstanding for any book. So I'm really excited to read this one. The next book on my TBR list is actually the third book in a trilogy, and it's called As Sure as Dawn by Francine Rivers. Now, you may be familiar with that name because Francine Rivers was actually the woman who wrote Redeeming Love. Redeeming Love actually became a movie quite a couple years ago. This is Christian fiction, and it is part of the Mark of the Lion series. So the first book is A Voice in the Wind, and the second book is An Echo in the Darkness, and then As Sure as Dawn is the third book in the trilogy. This book basically follows the life of Hadassah as she loses her family and becomes a slave and then a servant to this guy named Marcus and his household. This book actually does an excellent job of highlighting Christian persecution in the Roman Empire during the 2nd century. I loved this book so much. Again, I haven't read the 3rd one yet, but what's really interesting that the author did is Hadassah and Marcus's story mainly takes place throughout the first 2 books and wraps up at the end of the 2nd book. And then Atreides, who's on the front cover of the 3rd one, he is a German warrior during this time who is actually also taken as a slave from his tribe, I believe, to fight in the Colosseum. He is mentioned throughout the first 2 books, and you see probably a quarter of the first 2 books is like his story, but the 3rd book is mainly about him from the first 60 pages that I read of this book. I did DNF it about 4 years ago. I'm going to try again though, because when you read this book, oh my gosh, you get so invested in the main 2 characters. Then when their story ends, it's like when you get to the 3rd book, you're like, okay, I'm not sure I'm super attached to Atreides. So I'm going to try this again. I know there is a romance, not even subplot, big plot in the 3rd book, but there is a romance plot in the first 2. So this is Christian fiction. Even if you aren't Christian, I would highly recommend reading this book. It gives a really, really good depiction of a part of history that, you know, a lot of people don't know about, especially in school. I think we learn so much about the Roman Empire, Roman and Greek gods, and that part of history, but we don't really get to see the other side of it, which is what really happened during the Christian persecution of that time, and that even Christians were taken as slaves and basically slaughtered in the Roman Colosseum. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into these books this year. I do think that I will like historical fiction. I don't know if I'll love it as much as I love romantasy, and just the magic and the world building that is fantasy romance. Thanks so much for joining with me today, and follow along on my reading journey. See you guys soon.